make it. Now the time has come until then, tell it everyone. I got this feeling, can I let you go now, 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 now. But if your man is coming, your love for me is gone. There ain't nothing I can do now. And I think I'm gonna lose my
Mr. Larson was an innocuous little man with a beer belly who looked like someone's kindly grandfather. As Marin County's building inspector, it was just his job to tack abatement notices on the houseboats at gates 5 and 6. The papers said, "Notice to remove or destroy." I watched one day as Larson approached the Wang Ho with one of these papers. Joe was aboard and saw him coming. Without a word, Tate untied his mooring lines and let the boat drift from the pier as he raised his sails. The Wang Ho sailed silently away, leaving the building inspector standing helplessly at the water's edge. Larson's ignorance of the difference between sailboats and houseboats aside, if he'd ever had the chance to actually inspect that Chinese junk, he'd have found a quality of construction he or the other county experts couldn't have imagined. But that wasn't the point, and never was. There were forces gathering against the waterfront, and Larson was nothing more than a stooge.
Take that one. It doesn't have any doors between the rooms, faulty wiring, and you can see it doesn't have a rail. I've sent letter after letter, talked to everybody who'll listen, and nothing. This place is a pigsty.
Oh, maybe.
Believe it or not, Swanson, this is prime real estate, and the county wants it developed.
As soon as the Board of Supervisors votes the proper authority.
Is all this in your report?
Indeed it is, Michael. No running water, no proper bathrooms.
I've never seen so much junk in my life. This place is a disaster, and
Well,
who are these weirdos anyway?
Oh, most of them are refugees from Haight-Ashbury.
Look at that one over there. Incredible.
I haven't seen so much of it. You get used to it after a while.
I don't think it's supposed to go there. Maybe not. Oh, here comes one. Grief. Oh, yeah? Hey, let's give him a hard time, huh?
Come to see the animals in the zoo?
Just a minute. Let's go.
No one really paid Mr. Larson much attention or took the abatement notices seriously until the day when the county sheriffs came to tow away Joe's camel, the first houseboat Joe Tate had built and later sold. When Joe married Maggie and me at the dry docks, it was a pretty ho-hum affair. Even the LSD we took only served to amplify the nervous discomfort that accompanies that sort of ritual, even on our tongue-in-cheek level. But any excuse for a party was good enough, and we all wound up spending the night out there. The next morning was clear and calm. When I woke up and went to take a leak, I could see a Coast Guard boat in the distance. It was heading north by the Clipper Yacht Harbor breakwater, accompanied by another, smaller boat. Sensing something ominous, I boarded the Wang Ho, woke Joe and Pam, and grabbed their binoculars. Sure enough, gold-helmeted Marin County sheriffs were aboard the Coast Guard, and they were headed into the Gate 5 anchorage. Hardly anyone had outboard motors in those days. The Loafer was one of the few power boats, and Dredge was out of town. As fast as they could, everyone at the dry docks cast off and set sail for Gate 5. The Yipes Stripes was the fastest sailboat in the Redlegs fleet. Maggie and I got to Gate 5 first, where the sheriffs now had a tow line attached to Joe's camel and were preparing to take it away. The houseboat's occupant wasn't home, and the cops must have seen it as a sitting duck. Saul Ruda had been shooting 16mm film footage of the waterfront for 3 or 4 years. He had movies of parties, sailing, boat building, character profiles, even a mock wedding in the mud at low tide. Many of us took Saul less than seriously. We called him Media Man, and sometimes wondered if he felt inadequate without that camera on his shoulder. It could be very annoying to be going about your business or just trying to have a good time with an Aeroflex in your face. Saul may have had trouble living in the moment, but he was on to something nobody else had thought of. This place was too good to be true and couldn't last. He would have it on film. Boats of all sorts were headed out to the Camel, and tension was mounting. Maggie dropped me on shore, and I phoned Saul. "You'd better get up here with a camera, Saul. The cops and Coast Guard are trying to tow away the Camel." He was on the way in minutes and got it all. The cops were way out of their element. With all the metal they carried, they must have been terrified of falling into the water. Another problem for them was the nature of Joe's camel. A camel was a huge block of solid wood made from smaller blocks and held together with steel bolts. They would never sink. Camels originally functioned as fenders, preventing close-moored military ships from damaging each other. The average dimension was 12 feet long by 8 feet wide by 6 feet deep. They were like tiny icebergs, floating with only a few inches out of the water and totally waterlogged. Even without the weight and windage of a house built on it, a camel was an awkward nightmare to tow, even for an experienced boatman.
Don't worry, Sheriff. Coast Guard will be here in just a moment.
With hardware-laden tops to protect and chained to an object that was nearly impossible to move, the Coast Guard was helpless. 70 or 80 small boats went around them in circles, full of people shouting at them to mind their own business and go home. The smaller police boat was a Boston whaler, very maneuverable but helplessly outnumbered. One fat, bald sheriff on the whaler stroked his nightstick with gloved hands, a terrible, angry scowl on his face. One of the basic rules of boating is that sail has the right of way over motor. With this in mind, Joe, Maggie, and others in sailboats deliberately passed in front of the police boats over and over again, allowing them no progress. A few overzealous types poked at police with oars, resulting in little tugs of war. This landed some people in the water and enabled the cops to pull out a few and arrest them. The prisoners were handcuffed and left on the Coast Guard boat with no life jackets. To protest this, Joe rammed the Coast Guard with his bow crusher, a piece of T-shaped diamond plate steel affixed as a figurehead on the Wang Ho. It was getting near the stage of really dangerous violence when Randy Farwell appeared in his Boston whaler, one with a motor twice as powerful as the cops, and led the police whaler with the angry, gloved sheriff on a futile high-speed chase. They didn't get Joe's camel. We won the first battle, but the war was only beginning. Joe Tate was the first one to see that this was the beginning of the end, that politics and big money would prevail. Waterfront property in the nation's second richest county was too valuable to be occupied by what amounted to a bunch of squatters who thumbed their noses at the law. Real trouble was brewing at the Marin County Civic Center, where the Board of Supervisors and businessmen whose interests they represented were planning the conversion of the waterfront into a floating condo development. Sausalito was going the way of all charming seaside bohemian communities, inundated by tourists and filling up with businesses that catered to them. As in all such places, the very people that made it interesting would be driven out by the elements they attracted.
Forget about it.
One more time, seen it coming. Troubled times are here again. Got no money, pay my bills with. Well, then it sure does look like troubled times again. The price of beans is up and double. I can't hardly get no gas. If I could, would I go to? 'Cause they just tore down the fun house and made a mess. Yeah, well, I went to City Hall. Didn't take no time at all. Yeah, they threw me right out on my ear. Oh, I told them that I must find a reason that is just. Why you got to wreck my happy home? Well, I don't know just who's to blame. Things are messed up, yeah, just the same. Yes, it sure does look like troubled times again. Oh, yes, it sure does look like troubled times again. Whoa!
Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Come on, buddy. Make it easy on yourself. Just get off the boat.
Let's get off this. I ain't getting off this boat. It's mine. This is my property.
You're hereby notified that this floating home is occupied or used by you is in violation of the Uniform Building Code and Marin County Ordinance 1675. You've had ample notice. I order you to leave these premises immediately or be subject to arrest for interfering with an officer in the performance of his lawful duty. This structure will be towed to the heliport holding area. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings. Then this structure will be subject to demolition.
Well, I ain't moving off this boat. It's mine.
You better get off the boat or you're going to be arrested.
You ain't heard the last of this, you guys. You'll hear about it.
Command Central to Tugboat 12. Command Central to Tugboat 12. Come in, over. Tugboat 12, drag that derelict down to Heliport Beach.
Bring it on in. Bring it in now. Bring it in now.
This operation is going like clockwork. In exactly 12 minutes, that boat will be back to pick up number 3.
Stand clear out there. Get that boat out of here. Come on, come on. Tow it away. Tow it out.
This is my property. You're not gonna beach it. Hey, buddy, get off that boat.
Hey, Eddie, cut the line. Let's get out of here.
Put that knife down.
Just put that knife down and nobody will get hurt.
Now move out.
He has a gun on me, Joe. I think we better get out of here.
The first Redlegs dance on the Charles Van Dam was a direct reaction to the battle over Joe's camel. Legal money was needed for the people who had been arrested and charged with illegal assembly. Joe went to Don Arquez and got permission to use the old ferry for a benefit, and the waterfront went to work. The cleanup job inside the ferry was enormous and done willingly by a crew of enthusiastic volunteers. This was the best excuse for a party yet. Joe came up with a gimmick, free beer. This meant no ID at the door, no liquor license problems. Andy Goodman fronted money for the 7 kegs and 2 legally required rent-a-cops. Maggie went to work on a poster design and the Oakland shop became a silkscreen factory. The party was only 2 days in the making. The poster contained information about the benefit and location, but the big print, the gist of it was this. Tonight, the Redlegs, free beer.
Okay, let's hear it one more time for the starboard watch now. They're great, aren't they? Thank you all for coming.
Well, I was stand on by the river and I seen that girl come by. Sweet little mama, but she really catches my eye. Yeah, yeah, but I tell you, I am what I am. I take a ship that's crossing the sea. And I find a good time if you just give your loving to me. Well, let me sail across the ocean, baby, let me make you mine. 'Cause I can never cross the ocean if you don't love me all the time. That's right. 'Cause I can never cross the ocean if you don't love me all the time.
The first Ark dance led to another and then more. The next few were benefits for the houseboat cause, but we dropped the word after a while. The Redlegs now had drawing power and filled the Ark to capacity every time. The word concert was never used for a Redlegs event. It went along with the big business gentrification and pretense that had been corrupting rock and roll since the mid-60s. I could never get over the idea that there was something wrong with an awestruck audience sitting in reverence before a group of superstar guitar gods strutting around the stage in carefully contrived poses, the stage lined with armed security guards. Rock and roll was about having a good time, wasn't it? Every Redlegs dance had a different theme, which Maggie incorporated into the posters. We learned to get pretty loose with the word benefit, and decided since the band needed money, we would have a benefit for ourselves. This dance would be called the Down and Out Musicians Ball and feature a contest with a real houseboat for a prize. The boat in question, called the Munger, was a sunken derelict, a mud-filled 20-foot surplus lifeboat with a crude plywood structure. But it was a houseboat and could be floated and fixed up. As a second prize, Joe came up with an odd-looking leather strap and buckle device and called it a Tijuana donkey fuck harness. To win these fabulous items, contestants were obliged to deface the photograph of the Redlegs on the poster. Entries poured in by mail and by hand, right up to the night of the dance. Bob Steele's contribution was the most creative, or at least the most extreme, but definitely the most personal. He had smeared the photo with his own excrement, swirling it around in a nice spiral design. And he had the good taste to let it dry completely, too. For this, he won the Tijuana donkey fuck harness, and as Joe made the presentation, he earnestly wished Bob the best of luck with it. The grand prize winner was our old buddy, the Sun King, although I can't vouch for the objectivity or fairness of the final decision. The prize houseboat, the derelict in the mud, was visited a few times by its new owner, but never repaired. Gates 5 and 6 were attracting their own tourists. The grounded Charles Van Dam ferry, the Ark, was visible from Highway 101, and curious travelers would take the Marin City exit to check it out. When they found an entire community of unusual, colorful characters behind it, they were delighted. We were sometimes treated as if we were costumed employees of a theme park, there to answer questions and entertain the visitors. Groups of 10 or 15 people with cameras would walk down the docks, looking into windows and doorways, snapping away. Some would be discouraged if anyone asked for money to pose. Others were indignant. Most of these tourists would have called the police if a stranger even walked down the street in their neighborhood back home. Sometimes we got little old ladies' art classes who set up their easels and lawn chairs in the parking lot.
I want to be waves surrounded out on the beach, but it's all a dream, it's out of reach. Guess it was something that I should have done. I was just having too much fun. And when I should have run, I stayed. And you were so sweet to me, friend. I want to be waves are rolling in out on the beach, but it's all a dream, it's out of reach.
In some cases, the curious stayed or were absorbed. Pete Ritondo arrived on the waterfront as a journalist on assignment for San Francisco Magazine, searching for hippie vegetarian pirates. Well, he was right about the pirates part, anyway. By the time the article was published, Pete was fixing up his own houseboat. By 1973, the truly rank motherfuckers had faded into legend. Captain Garbage went north to fish for salmon. Peacock disappeared and showed up only once in a while. Strung out on heroin, Dredge sold the loafer and moved to Vancouver, Washington, and eventually to Quilcene on the Olympic Peninsula to try and clean up. Jesse Crocodile went home to Coos Bay. Little by little, better docks were built, people had babies, and it began to seem safer. No longer were all but the most adventurous kept away by some intangible aura of danger. Stories went around about National Geographic coming to do a pictorial.
I never write letters, I ain't got no phone. I visit my neighbors when I feel alone. And on Saturday night we all get together and dance in a circle and sing our song. I was just passing through on my way to the mountains. I stopped by my brothers who live by the shore. A man and a woman was singing and playing. As I looked in her eyes, you know she looked in mine. Darling, do you ever dream of me down where the land reaches the sea? Oh, girl from Gate 5, are you still alive?
The waterfront is over, said Joe one day after navigating his way past a dozen Japanese tourists. We need a big boat so we can take the band and sail anywhere. It sounded like a great idea, a seagoing rock and roll band. We could play the ports of the world and not be bothered with bureaucrats, building code, or tourists. It would be fuck a bunch of bullshit in its purest possible form. While the developers in the county moved in and turned the screws tighter and tighter, waterfront political types went into action and began organizing meetings. Up until then, parties had been the common meeting ground, and as I sat at the first meeting, listening to my friends and neighbors argue, I knew Tate was right. The waterfront, as I knew and loved it, was over. Meanwhile, Saul Reuter got serious about making a movie. He'd studied political science at Berkeley, and the houseboat war had fired him up. Here was just the angle he needed to make a real film out of his miles of waterfront home movies, an antagonist in the form of heartless developers and corrupt bureaucrats, a bad guy. He brought in another commercial filmmaker named Roy Nolan, and they set about concocting a script. We'd sit around at night talking about taking the band to sea, financing our travels by setting up gigs at the waterfront, dance halls, and bars all over the world. But even with all I'd seen here, the fruition and realization of possibilities and dreams, the big boat seemed like too much. Could it really happen? The band went on playing. We traveled north to Humboldt County and played on the Avenue of the Giants. We played Bimbo's, the old mafia showroom in North Beach. Bill Graham's Winterland, Keystone Corner, the old mill in Mill Valley. The built-in failure factor followed us to all these places. It seemed the further from the water, the worse the failure. I began to think of this as the Shangri-La effect. In James Hilton's Lost Horizon, the protagonist tries to take a beautiful young woman out of the fabled valley. When they cross the border, the girl becomes an aged hag and dies. Once we traveled 200 miles north for a big party and found a dingy, dirty cellar with 15 drunk hippies and no electricity. I raided the medicine cabinets, found Secanols and Nembutols, and passed them out to everyone in our entourage. We slept in the Schnargmobile on top of each other and the equipment and drove home in the morning without touching an instrument. But our parties on the waterfront, especially the arc dances, were great successes and became legendary. Meanwhile, without any fanfare, Joe had put the word out that he was looking for a big boat. I couldn't have been more wrong when I first arrived and thought the waterfront Redlegs scene was a cult. It was not a cult, a commune, a tribe. It wasn't even a deliberately organized or planned neighborhood, although it contained elements of all these things. Members of real cults and organizations were sometimes confused or threatened by the waterfront because it had a perceptible solidarity with no dogma, rules, or required form of behavior. The occasional Christian preacher looking for converts never got anywhere. Converts were made by ferreting out and playing on dissatisfaction and emptiness in people's lives, and it frustrated the hell out of missionaries and crusaders when they were just ignored. There was no stated unifying principle at work at all. The red-legging ritual, while seeming to strangers like a precursor to some terrible initiation rite, was nothing more than you saw, getting a red stripe painted down your legs. It was John Stevens who named the Redlegs. Actually, he recognized the Redlegs. Stevens was an itinerant jazz musician and writer, an intellectual with a keen perception of society's absurdities and a stinging wit. When someone referred to the Dry Docks gang as a bunch of rednecks, John replied, "They're not rednecks, they're red legs." The name stuck and the red stripes appeared. What John Stevens knew, and the Redlegs themselves did not, was that Redlegs were a historical phenomenon. Pete Ritondo had done some research and discovered references to 16th century Celtic mountain men with sunburned legs, known as redshanks. Here are some quotes from the Oxford English Dictionary. The name was appropriate, given an allusion to the color of the bare legs by exposure. The Irish lords of Scotland, commonly called Redshanks. The other part of Ireland is called the Wild Irish, and the Redshanks be among them. I will rather wed a most perfidious Redshank. By their actions, we might rather judge them to be a generation of Highland thieves and Redshanks. There might be knives again. These Redshanks are grudgeful. And from a Civil War history book. There was a secret military society organized in Kansas in 1862 called Redlegs because of their red leggings, who numbered 50 to 100. Their predatory activities rivaled depredations committed by Missouri guerrillas, and they served as federal scouts in border conflicts. As well as that, a certain advance guard of the Bengal Lancers in India were called Redlegs. For the real Redlegs story, we have to go back to the Celtic mountain men and Highland thieves. We can deduce from the Oxford quotes that the original Redshanks didn't enjoy the best of reputations, so it's not surprising how some of them wound up in the New World. While European speculators and businessmen were setting up their enterprises in the Americas, their agents, hired thugs, were kidnapping boatloads of black Africans and taking them west across the Atlantic to be sold as slaves to work on the new plantations. Although it's less generally known, the same thing was going on in the streets of Scotland and Ireland. Drunks, vagrants, criminals, and other social undesirables were waking up with hangovers or large lumps on their head to find themselves chained in the bilge of a westbound ship. Many of these were Redshanks or Redlegs. The only difference between them and the Africans was that the white slaves had been coerced by threat of death to sign an agreement or indenture, binding them legally to their abduction. These indentured servants didn't take kindly to their condition and often became troublemakers, joining forces with their black brothers in chains in open rebellion and escape. To this day, in the Caribbean islands, there are still people known as Redlegs, black, white, and all shades in between. Social outcasts on both sides of the color fence living in their own ghettos. A little inquiry among the Sausalito Redlegs turned up at least half Scottish-Irish blood in the core group, without exception.
I got to fuck a bunch of bullshit, red leg boogie blues. I got to fuck a bunch of bullshit, red leg boogie blues. Oh yeah! I don't live right on some red leg boogie blues. I'm up in the morning, get my breakfast in bed. Come here, honey. I want you to give me some head. All right now. Out on it right on some red leg boogie blues. Oh, I got the fuck a bunch of boogie, red leg boogie blues. Oh yeah now. I got the fuck a bunch of boogie, red leg boogie blues. Oh yeah. Out on it right on some red leg boogie blues. Let's play it now. You wake up in the morning, you think you got the blues. You ain't got the blues. No, you got the mean red blouse. That's B-L-A-W-E-S. Blouse, baby, blouse. Yeah, got the funky boogie, red, red boogie blouse. Oh, yeah, got the funky boogie, red, red boogie blouse. Oh, yeah, I wanna try out some red, red boogie blues.
My name is Piero Caro. I live at Gate 5 on a ferry boat called the San Rafael. I've lived on the waterfront for more than 20 years. I'd like to tell you about the excellence of our community. For more than those 20 years on that mud flat, a very important, a very healthy community has come into existence. This community is composed largely of your sons and your daughters, the children of the middle class. They come in usually very incompetent, often psychotic, often with cops at their backs, not knowing how to saw a board. But they come in and nobody says yes or no to them. They find a place and they spend the next year, sometimes 2 and 3, building and rebuilding their houseboat. Which turns out to be, interestingly, vernacular architecture. Very interesting and very important. Also, they come to do a very other important thing. They come to find a world in which they can operate and they can move. The reason that they've come is because the world that was your world cannot accommodate their needs. They either have too much energy or too much talent or too much rebellion. In any case, they're the young. And accommodation has to be made for them. If you pass this ordinance, you'll make it impossible for those kind of young people to live on the waterfront. You'll make a middle-class marina too expensive for us. What then? Well, you can build more hospitals. You can build more jails. You can hire more police. You can have more social workers, probation officers. But that's what would have happened if these people had not come onto this waterfront. As it is, for 20 years I've watched these people come in. Now they're all my old friends. A young man comes in and makes himself a home and finds a chick and has kids. The kids now are grown up in high school and college. It's a very healthy and excellent community where people live freely and well. And the adoption of this ordinance will bring that to an end. I hope that you will not adopt the ordinance.